You're going to be working with a lot of clients, and when you work with clients, you're bound to meet some challenging ones. Today, we're going to discuss 5 challenges that you may encounter with difficult clients and how to work around those challenges to be able to create an impact, a connection back with these clients. The number one challenge that you will encounter with your clients is they going off the tangent. How many times have you worked with a coaching client where the client starts talking about something and then keeps rambling and keeps going in circles and keeps talking and talking and talking and talking, and you realize they are talking a lot, but are they really going anywhere? Often, when such situations happen as a coach, you feel you shouldn't stop your client. You shouldn't really tell them that they're talking too much or they're talking about ideas that have no relevance. This fear allows them to be able to speak their mind for so long that often we find ourselves half the way into a coaching session and barely getting a question in. So, what do you do when you have a challenging client who likes to talk a lot? First, you need to understand why would a client talk so much. I have found there are primarily 2 reasons. The first reason is because they have nobody else to talk to. This is actually the more common reason why a client is very expressive, especially in the first few coaching sessions, is because you, for once, have become one person that is actually listening to them. In this scenario, you actually want to be the safe space that they're hoping you would be when they're speaking their minds. Remember, there is a big possibility that this client has friends, but they don't really understand them, or partner that understands them but doesn't really listen to them. They might have had been in a relationship that is actually torturous for them or really, really hard for them to currently function in. And because of all those reasons, right now, you are that space where they're speaking their heart out. Be that space. Be that person. Don't try to cut them short because in a few sessions, you will find that your client has shared everything what they needed to share. And then they'll be a lot more receptive to any question that you might have. This is not the time to break the camaraderie, break the rapport. Instead, this is the time to further your rapport by actually listening to your client. But then comes the second situation, which is when your client is speaking the same thing again and again and again, it's because they think you are not understanding what they're actually saying. This happens when somebody has had to explain themselves many times in their lives. And because they have had to explain themselves many times in their lives, they feel that you actually probably are not getting the point they're trying to make. And hence they need to keep saying it and keep evaluating it and keep explaining it to you until you finally get the point. These kind of situations, you need this one trick to be able to get your client out of their loop and back into the conversation. When you find that the client is repetitive, if they're repeating themselves, ask them, hold on for a second. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. And then repeat whatever you understood of that conversation until then. There are 2 things that are happening here. Firstly, you're requesting that the client pays attention to if you're understanding everything correctly, which allows them to be able to really make sense of if you're making sense. And the second thing is that now, while they were going in a loop, they were in their head, they're in their minds, and they were not really stopping to see if you were understanding. Now they finally got a chance to stop, focus on if you actually understood what they have been saying all this while, and be able to go, okay, I have been understood. I should go to my next point. This simple technique allows for your client to break the flow in a good way. The second challenge comes with really extraordinarily smart individuals who tend to always disagree with you or have a resistance to any idea that you may propose, any question you may ask, any tool you might suggest. This often happens with individuals that are argumentative. These happens with individuals who are usually in businesses, have built things by themselves, and are really opinionated about what they do and how they like things. And because they are so opinionated, it is actually really difficult sometimes to get through them because they are so resistant and they like to disagree because they have a really strong point of view. Congratulations, you have a high performer at your hand. How do you bring attention of such disagreement and resistance to a high performer? Well, one of the ways that you could try working with this client and kind of make them less challenging as a client is to bring attention to what they're actually doing. So, for example, let's say if there was a client that tends to disagree with you or tends to have a lot of resistance to everything that you're sharing with them, bring their attention to Is that how you like to question everything? Is this something that you've been operating as for most of your life? Do you feel that people around you don't tend to share their opinions openly because it seems like you tend to disagree with them? If any of these questions sound like you could present them in a nice and kind way to your clients, present this to your client. What we are really trying to do is bring their attention to what they are doing. These individuals who tend to be argumentative and resistant and opinionated are individuals who are usually really high performers, which means that if they see that they are doing something that may be holding back their performance, restraining new ideas, not help them build camaraderie with their team members and business partners, they will be very willing to listen. They tend to already be very harsh on themselves, very judgmental of themselves, which means if you bring the attention to, hey, there is something that you might be doing, it is very, very likely that they will take it as good feedback and say, let me observe this for myself. And then if they start to observe this for themselves, you'll find that slowly they become more open-minded. They become more receptive to what you're sharing and what ideas you might have. They'll become more open-minded and less resistant to everything that you propose. And most of the time, they would also be less argumentative. Which brings me to the third challenge that most often difficult clients tend to have, which is they are either too detailed or they're too vague. I put them together because they're kind of the same problem. They are too detailed because they are detail oriented. They kind of have OCD a little bit, and too vague because often they have ADHD. They want to have many ideas being processed at any given time. Neither of them are helpful in being able to take action. When somebody is too detailed, they tend to think 10 steps ahead. When they are thinking 10 steps ahead, often they're not really taking any action. They are mostly just thinking 10 steps ahead. So when a client is too detailed, you want to bring their attention to what such details are doing to their ability to take action. So for example, let's say a client that you're working with is very detailed. They go, step 1, I'll do this. Step 2, I'll do this. Step 3, I'll do this. Step 4, step 10, I will do this. Step 20, I'll do this. So they're trying to plan so much ahead in the future that they are actually not taking any action in the now. When you're in a coaching conversation with them, you may find that they go on talking the details for 20, 30, 40 minutes without actually considering that a lot of those details may never happen or are not even relevant to the conversation that you're having. So one of the techniques that I like to use when I'm working with such detail-oriented clients is I bring their attention to what's important now. What's the most immediate thing that we really need to focus on or pay attention to? So instead of wondering, hey, what is going to be step 10 or step 20, before even we get there, we're like, can we focus on the step that we're currently considering? Can we focus on step 1? Can we focus on step 2? Because those are the steps that actually matter right now. How about we come back to this conversation after we have implemented step 1, because then we would have some real data. See, anybody that is detail oriented is also very much understanding that life can change, details can change, and feedback informs the details. So if you bring their attention to, hey, listen, let's focus on this step for now, what is very likely to happen is that their then attention to detail will go only to step that is in front of them. And once that happens, now you've got somebody who's, instead of projecting into the future and finding all the details until step 25, they are focused on step 1 and executing step 1. And once they execute step 1, once they take action towards it, once you have done all the coaching that is required around step 1, you will have more action and hopefully more results, which allow you to decide further actions. And then you can keep bringing their attention back to not going too much into detail, but just enough so they can take action. That brings us to a person that might be too vague. People who like to generally talk in broad strokes and never really get to the details. This often happens with individuals that might have ADHD. And because they have ADHD, they're very high functioning. And when you're high functioning individuals, you tend to have all these ideas coming at you at the same time, and you're able to not only understand them, but actually process them and be able to create an action step for it. The unfortunate thing that happens with it is none of it has a definition well enough that somebody else or in partnership or that person who's even defining the step can do it effectively. They can do it, It's just not effective. It's not efficient. So what you want to do for somebody who's too vague in the dialogue, who's more generalized, who's shooting shit in the air and coming up with too many ideas, is you want to bring their attention and ask them, hey, could you further define it? What would it look like if you defined it further? Like, what is the nuance that one should take care of if we could do only one thing at a time? So somebody who's ADHD or somebody who's very vague in their dialogue might have 4, 5, 6 broad strokes that they really want to go for. And so what you will bring their attention to is, instead of thinking about these really broad strokes, so how about we take one of them that is the most effective thing that we can do, the most powerful thing that we can do. And if we could bring attention to it, would it be possible for us to actually take definitive action towards that? See, in coaching, a lot of the times what we are doing is helping clients find clarity instead of all the noise that is coming at them, all the nuances that are coming at them, all the ideas that are coming at them. What we are helping our clients to do is to part those clouds and be able to come through with a pure light of clarity. And because that's our intention, what our intention also becomes is, once that clarity is achieved, there's some kind of action that is taken. Because clarity is meaningless if there is no follow-up action. So what is the action that one can take once this clarity comes through? And when somebody is very vague, that is also one of the attentions that we want to bring towards them, is what is it that you can do right now? What is it that we can define right now so you can take some action? Which brings me to the fourth most common challenge that you might experience with difficult clients. And that is, your client is too shy. A lot of times when we are starting to coach with a client is trying to find rapport with us. They're trying to find trust with us. And if in life generally they're not really vocal, or they have not found the confidence to really share what's true and authentic to them, what you may find is that the client tends to feel shy while they're in a conversation with us. And when they are shy, it's very little that we can work with, because all we are trying to do is drag a little bit more out of them, drag a little bit more nuance out of them, understand what they're really feeling. But they tend to give us short answers or no answers at all. They tend to reply to a lot of questions by saying, I don't know, or I don't know what to say here, or I don't know what to experience here. One of the ways to work with such clients is to ask them, what are they feeling right now? Ask them to stop thinking and share what they're experiencing right now and what they're feeling right now. So let's say you're in a dialogue with a client that tends to be really shy. You would say something to the degree of, don't think about it. Tell me what you feel right now. Tell me, as you share this with me, what are you experiencing right now? As I ask you this question, what emotion do you feel? What's the experience that you have? What you're really doing is breaking that barrier that they have because of the thinking that they're putting in between your question and their answer. Because they, as they're a shy person, arguably maybe a really unconfident person or underconfident person, because of that, they're finding a resistance to be able to openly share something with you. Now, when you tell them to stop thinking and respond from whatever that is present to them in that moment, without thinking about it, the first answer that comes to them, it allows for them to not be overthinking, over managing, trying to find the right answer. All of those things go away, and it allows for them to purely respond from what may be happening in that moment for them. What is the experience they're having? What's the emotion that they're experiencing? What is that feeling that is happening or going through them? And that allows for us to be able to break that shyness barrier, that shyness that they may be experiencing at that time, and be able to move on with that client to create some powerful outcomes, or at least a further dialogue. Which brings me to the fifth most common challenge that coaches experience when working with clients, and that is the clients that pretend to know it all. We've all had such a client. We have had a client who was just self-diagnosed all the problems they have. They blame their parents, they blame their family, they blame their culture, they blame the country, the politicians, the society, or whatever it may be. And these are the clients that often tend to become the hardest one to work with, because they tend to think that they know it all. And the reason why they believe is because they have spent a long time trying to make sense of the world. And so to make sense of the world, they intended to have a lot of opinions, because otherwise, how do you make sense of the world? Because they have a lot of opinions, they start thinking that their opinions are actually facts. But opinions are not facts. Opinions are a perception of a story that somebody told themselves long enough that they believe it to be true, and hence it becomes their opinion of the world. Now, this person has a strong opinion about whatever they are discussing with you. So, the only way to really bring their attention is when they start questioning what they believe to be true, if it is true. So, some of the most powerful questions that you can ask them at this point is firstly, is it true? Just simply ask them, what you're believing right now about life, is it true? Do you, for a matter of fact, can say that it would be true every single time? So say, for example, if they've started to believe a truth about life that, people only act in their self-interest, you could ask them, is it true? Has it always been true that you've only acted in your self-interest? Or have you acted sometimes in the interest of others? And when they kind of start to notice that they have actually done stuff in interest of others, like a family member, somebody they loved, now their reality starts to shift. They go, oh, no, no, there have been instances where I have acted in interest of somebody else. So like, okay, so there is evidence to be found. And there are situations to be found where you did not act only in self-interest. You actually also acted in the interest of others. So what is it that we can then say that might be a potential other truth than the truth that you believe to be true? So as a matter of fact, if you've always believed that people act in your self-interest, considering that you have sometimes acted not in your self-interest, what else could be a matter of fact? Well, the other matter of fact could be that sometimes people do act not in their own interest, but in somebody they love interests. And if that is also another matter of fact, could this be true that whatever you have believed or have an opinion about life is not a fact, it's an opinion? Because it could be variable by person as to who they actually act in interest of, based on who they love, where they live, what culture they come from. What we are really doing is, say if somebody had that belief, they genuinely had the belief that people are not trustable because they always act only in their self-interest, they would have a hard time make friends. They would have a hard time have a love relationship. They would have a hard time being able to trust people who do jobs for them. They'll have a hard time building and getting business partners. And if you're having a hard time in all of these things, you'll probably have a hard time operating in the world. So breaking such a reality or challenging such an opinion for your client allows the client to be able to understand that the world is more complicated than their opinion currently is. While their opinions are absolutely valuable, if they do not serve the client, we must challenge them. So when a client comes in which is very opinionated, they think they know it all, bring attention on realities that do exist that are contrary to what their opinion is. And it may mean showing them data. It may mean asking them for stories themselves. It may mean you sharing some stories that actually don't prove the same thing and provides an alternative view of the world that is possible. Because very often when a client is know-it-all, they've also created a warped reality, a world around them that is not necessarily helpful to them. Very often it comes from a place of hurt. And so the reality that they create is a reality that actually hurts them further, because there was a point in time where something bad happened to them. Somebody did something that they were not expecting. Now, because they want to defend themselves every single time in the future, they start to operate in the world as if that's the absolute truth. And that, over time, is not super helpful to them. And so what you're doing as a coach is bringing a little bit more empowered truth, as I like to call it, in their life. Which of these 5 challenges seem to be the most common for you? Which of these 5 challenges that you have experienced in your clients, and do you think the tools I suggested would help you? Share with me in the comment section below so I can help you further in dealing with these difficult situations and these difficult clients.